Little things like this vase, small vase of flowers, with just a few specimens from the garden. That's when it really pays off, all that hard work that you put into your garden, just to have something very simple and beautiful like this sitting on your table. So here we have the American Rose, climbing American Rose, a little bit of what's left over of the liatris, some little phlox, leftover phlox, and the best performing rose I had all year was the Generous Gardener, David Austin. First year rose, and it really, really was a continuous bloomer with lots and lots of blossoms on each bush. This one I really loved, and the scent of it is just marvelous. I think the most successful dahlias, the dahlias weren't great, I will tell you that. I also love this little Tequila Sunrise, which is a first year rose for me, and not as lush as the others, very delicate and silky, but pretty good on the bloom performance. And then the Joey Joshua dahlias, I really loved those. And the cactus dahlias have been really great. So I just like to take a few specimens out of the garden. I want to leave most everything in the garden. I'm pretty stingy about that, but there's just nothing like having a very small bouquet on your table. It just makes you happy. I think there may have been a little bit of confusion last week when I titled my video Creating Garden Rooms, because I believe that was misunderstood by a few people as to what a garden room is. In this case, we were talking about outdoor garden rooms. They're a part of your home, and they're a room, but they're outside your house. They're living spaces outside of your house. So a garden room would be an enclosed area actually in your garden or your yard. And your walls would be your fences or your bushes or the side of a house, shed, a long flat trellis, or even a very tall garden. Anything that will enclose your room on, I think, at least 2 sides and maybe even 3 sides. One of my walls would be the fencing on this side, fencing on the back, adjoined with a trellis which has a climbing rose on it, or it will anyway. And on this side you could even call this a wall as well. It's a cast iron fence enclosing a garden, and it will be filled with very tall plantings by next year. So yeah, that's definitely a living wall. This little cast iron garden wall fence, I want to create even more of a garden wall by planting really tall things. And they have to be tall anyway because they're in the back of this shade garden. So I've already done some rows of Sharon bushes, pretty small right now, 1 to 2 feet tall. We've got honeysuckle growing up, which I've cleared a lot of that out because I just don't want it covering the ground. I've got several small trees, some very tall perennial sunflowers that grow here every year and keep spreading. I want to do some seeding in here. I'm going to be doing Dame's Rocket because it's tall and beautiful and blooms in early to mid-spring. Also Bee Balm, which blooms early summer and is very, very tall and doesn't mind the dry shade. And then up here a little bit closer to the front, I want to do some foxglove. I'll put a lot of foxglove babies in trays, but I'm also going to just freely seed it in this section. Also, we have daylilies that grow in here just wildly. gooseneck loosestrife, and up front I put the irises. So we'll see what else we can do in here as far as seating goes, but that's a good start. Okay, now don't do anything mean. Hey, guys, these guys are just starting to tolerate each other. As you can see, they don't tolerate each other very well. Now, just like an inside room is accessorized and there is a certain atmosphere or style to it, so is the same with your outside garden room. So in my case, I have more of a whimsical rustic style here, and I love the old urns, and terracotta is one of my favorite things in the world because it just brings out that color, especially if it's got some natural moss on it, which I just am thrilled to have those couple pots that actually did that on their own. Depending upon your design style, you're going to fill in your garden space, your garden room, with the things that you like. And in this case, we are connected to a woodland garden that I'm creating over there, as you know. And I'm using a lot of rustic pots, concrete, mosses, stumps, log stumps, broken pottery. And hopefully we're going to fill this area in with roses here. Now this particular garden room is in the front yard garden, so we do have a road out there in which we get some traffic, and at this point I don't have a whole lot of privacy until the vines fill in and the roses over here fill in and start covering the fence a little bit better. I keep a lot of cool things up in the barn, on the second floor of the barn. And so I went up there looking for something else to add to this garden room, and I found this pot holder, which I don't think I've used this in many, many years. So all I need to do now are fill those pots with something. In the meantime, they're just holding wild violets. Now this antique cast iron piece, which I really love, I had to reject it for this garden because it just really doesn't fit the mood in here. So I'm going to have to find another spot for it. I've had it for years, and I've actually never found the proper place to put it. Now these old chicken feeders that I have, I've collected about 4 of them, are pretty good for this garden because they have that rustic look, kind of an old world feeling to them. And when I fill them with soil and compost and a garden mixture, they are great for planting little bulbs, such as hyacinths or muscari and small alliums. I think even daffodils would be pretty coming up through here. Yeah. With her one little baby. I let her keep 1 egg when I found her in the garden sitting on 20 eggs, and I didn't want any more chickens. I took away 19 eggs and left her with 1. And now she's got an extremely tiny baby, but she's a very, very small hen as well. Another important element in your garden room is going to be seating. So you do want somewhere to sit. Table is nice as well if you can fit it in. This is a pretty large space. I could even get a bigger table in here. This is good enough for me. And I have 2 chairs, a table. You can sit here, have a cup of coffee or tea, have a sandwich, and even have a guest. So that's very important. So a great inspiration would be this book called The Decorated Garden Room. I'm going to flip through a couple of the pages just so you can possibly get some inspiration from some of the rooms in this book. Ideas for flooring, decorating, etc. Another consideration when creating a garden room is to think about what you are looking out on. Aside from the walls that are around you, you will have an open space, and what is that pointing to? What is the view that you have when you sit in your chair drinking your tea? So here you can see that I'm actually looking out on a path and another garden room underneath the pergola. That is a garden room as well. And beyond that, something more. So if you look around you and you say, wow, every place I look, I have a really interesting view. In this little corner here with the cast iron fencing, is interesting. The ivy draws my eye to that garden and that Japanese maple tree. And beyond the fence, you can see the little mulberry tree, and you can see another garden fence and gate going into another section of the property. Another thing I like is that between these fences, pickets, I can see the creek. On the other side of this front yard garden, there's a slope. Beyond this, it slopes down onto the creek, which runs all the way across the property. And as I said, this is in a front yard, so we do have the road out front, but really don't get that much traffic. And here's a great example from the book of a garden room looking out on a vista. Now, sometimes the view that you have from your garden room isn't going to be that pleasant. And this is actually above one of my garden walls, but I can see the propane tank, which is pretty ugly to look at. So the plan is to plant about 3 evergreen trees right behind this fence. Fast-growing evergreen trees, I hope. I'm going to pick some thujas today, and I want to start to block the view of that propane tank because it's not very pleasant. Other than that, from every angle, I think I have a pretty nice view. As soon as I put away those garden tools. Of course, I kind of like the look of garden tools anyway. Get excited about filling in your garden room. It doesn't take very long for things to start happening. So lots of little pansies and violas down here in the corner. I found some Canterbury bells that were reseeded in my front yard garden, and I dug those up to plant next year somewhere. So I got about 6 of those. I wanted to fill my pots, so I dug up some strawberries from another part of the yard. I just borrow plants from other areas in order to fill in this trellis until the Tessa de d'Urberville's rose takes over. I dug up some variegated ivy from another garden room and planted it in these pots that are lined up on the shelf against the trellis, just to help it fill in temporarily and give me my garden wall there. Lots of pansies, you know. These were the only colors I could find, but wow, they turned out to be very beautiful. Perfect for September. A couple pots of herbs, and here's what the little hellebores look like so far. Flooring in your garden room, you don't need hardscaping. It doesn't have to be stone or brick or gravel or pavers or flagstones, anything like that. You could use moss, you could use sedums, you could use just your grass. A great example of grass-floored garden room is right here in this example from the book. Well, yesterday we managed to pick up a couple more of these thuja evergreen trees to block off that propane tank and that ugly sore spot there. So those will be going into the ground today, and then I was able to pick up a couple of potted perennials. This is a great time to plant a lot of things. Fall is perfect for planting. So when I got the trees, I also picked up a couple really great perennials, fall planting. Heuchera right here. I've got 3 of these, really nice. Coral bells also, $7.50, not a bad price for a healthy plant like this. And this is a great time to be planting some of these perennials. So in this dry shade corner here, I really had to amend the soil. It was a terrible clay, dried out area, and I amended it with a lot of compost, peat, and a little vermiculite as I was putting in the roses. So now I'm digging a nice, wonderful, roomy hole with my heuchera. I'll put the 3 heucheras in this garden so they can grow amongst these roses. pop it down in that hole and give it a good long drink. I've set it down in its new home, and I'm going to give it a nice long drink with my watering can. I recommend that you keep a lot of watering containers or watering cans in your garden room if the hose doesn't reach the section, because you're going to need them if you're planting a lot of things in your garden room, which I hope you are. And have a little tip for you on watering cans, because oftentimes if you collect the old ones like I do, they are leaking. So a way to resuscitate your old watering cans or your metal vessels that you use for watering your plants outside is to use roofing tar. Now, I admit it doesn't look very pretty on the bottom, but who's going to see the bottom anyway? And it really does save your can. And sometimes I'll cover the entire bottom of an old watering can with tar, and that will keep it good for many, many years to come. So just a little tip. Now here I have a very small thuja. I bought 2 of these last year to put in window boxes during Christmas, and I never did transplant them into the ground, so they just stayed in tiny pots. Well, I moved them into bigger pots and put those bigger pots into these red clay pots, because eventually I want to get these into the ground when they get bigger. But in order to hide that ugly plastic line, I put a grapevine wreath around it, and that's covered in a lot of moss, which is falling out of the trees. So that helps lessen that hard line of the plastic a little bit. Well, you may notice that the flower arrangement on the table keeps changing, and that's because I've been recording this over a matter of days, and I think I've just about done all I can in this woodland garden. So I will proceed in the next video to work on the woodland garden, which is adjacent right there. Hopefully my bulbs will have come in by then, and I'll be able to plant some bulbs with you and show you some nice combinations of bulbs and perennials to put in a shady area. So, before I close out this video, allow me to take you into the potting shed and show you a mishap that occurred last week concerning my seeds. Well, it looks like I have a cautionary tale to tell today, and I have to eat a little bit of humble pie, because when I did my video on my herbarium, my potting shed, I had a couple commenters say, what do you do when you're storing your seeds? What do you do about mice? And my response was, well, I don't really have to worry about mice, because I put peppermint oil on the floors and in the corners, and I have so far been able to keep the mice away from my seeds. Well, sorry, I was wrong. They got my seeds, and they made an absolute mess of it. You wouldn't believe how many seed packets they got into. Now, the seed packets that I'm talking about were on this shelf, way up here. Nevertheless, mice can climb. And it could have been a chipmunk. I don't know. It could have been a squirrel, but I am telling you, if it were mice, there must have been an army of them. This is just a sampling of what they did to my seeds. Now, this could have been the work of a chipmunk or a squirrel, because this window pane is broken, and they could have gotten in that way. But I have a tendency to think more likely this was mice when I look at the way these packets were absolutely chewed up. And they seem to take great pleasure in attacking all my beautiful art packets that I bought specifically for the artwork. They absolutely annihilated these seed packets. They also left a lot of seed on the table. Mostly what they went after were my sweet peas. There were hardly any sweet peas left at all. These packets were all over the floor. They were all over the table. They were absolutely everywhere. When I found this mess, I took everything in the house, and I'm going to show you the further damage that they did, because you just won't believe it. So this has taught me a huge lesson. Keep my seeds in glass. Thank goodness I had all those seeds in glass. But I am guessing that they got at least 50 packets of seeds that I had been saving up for planting over the winter and fall planting. If you'd been here, Rocket, maybe this never would have happened. But you didn't even know about this potting shed then, did you, Rocket? So, I have to start all over again, but this is really disappointing. So here's some more of the damage. I just brought them onto the table on the front porch just to see what I could salvage. I'm going to count these seed packets and see how many they got into. I brought my seed container into the house so I can look at the damage. And fortunately, they didn't get any of these. Well, the ones they got, I've already taken out. As you can see, they've had a good old time here. Look at that. But they also left a lot. Look at this. Hollyhocks, lupins in there. Apparently, they didn't like the taste of those. But they really messed this up. Look at this. Look at this. It just looks like they were storing them for a later time. And they just ripped open the packages and then just left them in there. So at least I can save a lot of my seeds. They're still here. The problem is, with many of them, I don't recognize what they are. Just look at that. What do you think did that? What is your guess? This is onions. They liked these a lot. A mouse, a squirrel, chipmunk. Rats? Ugh, I hope it wasn't rats. I really don't like rats one bit. So despite the fact that I had that mishap with the seeds, I do plan on having a seed giveaway here really soon with all those money plant seeds that I gathered from our garden. In the meantime, I hope you'll consider creating a garden room, whether it be a very tiny one or a very large one. And you'll really enjoy it. I think I do already. I love this section of the yard. So, from Hopalong Hollow, this is Jerry, and we will see you next time. Bye. My guys love it in here. I don't know, they just spend hours in here poking around, and for some reason, you like it in here, don't you, boys? It's okay, you can stay as long as you like. Just don't eat the flowers.